In 1965, a man standing in sawdust, wearing a blood-stained striped apron, held a financial power that most university graduates today can only dream of. He didn't have a degree, he didn't work in the City of London finance sector, he didn't have a side hustle, and he certainly didn't have a portfolio of cryptocurrency. He was your local high street butcher. Back then, on a single manual labor wage, this man could walk into a bank, look the manager in the eye, and secure a mortgage for a 3-bedroom semi-detached family home. He drove a brand new Ford Cortina. He took his family to the coast every summer for 2 weeks. He had a pension, and he did it all without a credit card, without an overdraft, and without the crushing anxiety that defines modern life. Today, a modern retail manager works longer hours, manages complex software, deals with corporate targets, and answers emails at 9 p.m., yet their salary dissolves instantly into rent, energy bills, and student loan repayments. They own nothing, they save nothing. So I have a question for you, and I want you to really think about this before we go further. How did the British working class of the past hold so much more wealth than the professionals of today? Was it just simpler times, or have we been robbed? In this video, we are going to walk through the frozen morning streets of 1960s Britain. We will step inside the butcher shop, not just to look at the meat, but to look at the money. We will uncover the daily life, the brutal hard work, and the lost economic model that allowed a man with a knife to live better than a man with a degree. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will realize that the empty shops on your high street aren't just a sign of changing habits, they are the crime scene of a stolen economy. But before we talk about the money, let's talk about the cost. Because if you think life was easy back then, you are very much mistaken. We tend to look at the past through rose-tinted glasses, but the reality of the 1960s workplace was brutal, physical, and exhausting. Imagine your alarm going off at 3:30 in the morning. It is pitch black outside. The heating has been off all night, and the house is freezing. While the rest of the town is warm in their beds, the butcher is already moving. He drinks a cup of tea that is more sugar than water, puts on his heavy boots, and steps out into the dark. By 4 a.m., he is at the Smithfield Market or the local abattoir. This wasn't a job for the weak. He was hauling whole carcasses, sides of beef weighing hundreds of pounds on his back. There were no forklifts here. There were no health and safety officers telling him how to bend his knees, just muscle, bone, and grit. He was carrying the weight of the massive animal, slipping on wet cobblestones, his breath steaming in the cold air. I want you to ask yourself, could you do this? Could the modern office worker survive just 1 week of this routine, waking up at 3 a.m. every single day for 40 years, carrying dead weight before breakfast? The milkmen, the miners, the dockers, they were built differently back then. Their bodies were hardened by a life of labor that has almost entirely vanished from our society, and when he finally got to the shop, there was no relief. You see, a butcher shop had to be cold. There was no central heating allowed. To keep the meat fresh, the windows were open even in December. The floor was covered in sawdust to soak up the blood and the melting ice. The butcher's hands were often red, raw, and covered in chilblains, painful, itchy swellings caused by the cold, damp air. They didn't wear the chainmail or latex gloves you see today. It was just the skin of their hands against the cold steel of the knife and the ice-cold meat. If you shook a butcher's hand in 1965, it felt like sandpaper. It was hard, it was rough, but that hardness was the foundation of his family's security. Today, if you work in a supermarket meat aisle, your job title might be assistant, but in reality you are a box opener. The meat arrives in plastic trays, pre-cut by laser-guided machines in a factory miles away, pumped full of water and preservatives to make it look pink for longer. You take the box off the truck, you cut the tape, and you put the plastic tray on the shelf. That is the extent of the skill required. But in 1970, the butcher was a craftsman. He needed the anatomical knowledge of a surgeon. A customer would walk in, let's call her Mrs. Higgins. She'd say, I have 6 people coming for Sunday roast, but I'm on a budget, and Uncle Albert has bad teeth, so he needs something tender. The butcher wouldn't just point at a shelf. He would look at the carcass hanging on the hook, and he would know exactly how to extract a specific joint to feed 6 people without wasting a penny. He could debone a leg of lamb in under a minute. He could tie a rolled roast with his eyes closed. One slip of the knife meant ruined stock, or worse, a severed tendon in his hand. He knew how to separate the silver side from the top side. He knew how to prepare a brisket so it wouldn't be tough. This sound, the heavy thud of the cleaver on the wooden block, the swish of the knife on the sharpening steel, that was the rhythm of the high street. This wasn't unskilled labor. It was a highly refined trade that took 5 years of rigorous apprenticeship to master. A boy started at 15, sweeping sawdust and scrubbing the chopping blocks with wire brushes. By 18, he was allowed to make sausages. By 21, he was a master. Today we have replaced that mastery with minimum wage jobs that teach you nothing but how to scan a barcode. We haven't just lost the shops, we have lost the human potential. We have de-skilled our entire workforce in the name of efficiency. And it wasn't just physical skill, it was mental sharpness. Picture a Saturday morning in 1968. The shop is packed. There are 50 people waiting. Smoke from cigarettes is mixing with the cold air. The noise is deafening. The butcher is serving 3 people at once. He weighs a pound of sausages, half a pound of bacon, and a kidney. He shouts, "That'll be 7 shillings and 6pence, love." He calculated that in his head, instantly, no calculator, no iPad, no till telling him the change. He was doing complex mental arithmetic involving pounds, shillings, and pence, a currency system so complicated it would make a modern mathematician cry, while simultaneously asking Mrs. Higgins about her hip operation and keeping an eye on the apprentice. Today, if the computer system goes down in a supermarket, the shop closes. The staff literally cannot function without the machine telling them what to do. But the butcher was the machine. He knew Mrs. Jones liked her bacon thick cut. He knew Mr. Smith liked the bone left in. He knew everyone's name, everyone's business, and everyone's budget. It makes you wonder if progress has actually made us less capable as humans. Have we become slower because our machines have become faster? We have outsourced our thinking to the microchip, and in doing so, we have lost a certain sharpness that the working class of Britain used to possess in abundance. Now let's get to the uncomfortable truth, the money. The economy of the 1960s and 70s was physical. It was the cash economy. At the end of the week, the butcher received a brown pay packet. You could feel the weight of your labor. There was a psychological power to holding your wages in your hand that a digital bank transfer simply doesn't have. You sat at the kitchen table on a Friday night, and you divided the cash into piles. 1 pile for the rent, 1 pile for the coal, 1 pile for the housekeeping, and 1 pile for the pub. Credit existed, but it wasn't a trap yet. If you couldn't afford a television, you rented it, or you saved up. You didn't put it on a card with 29% APR. Today, money is invisible. It vanishes via direct debit before you even wake up on payday. We have lost the sensation of ownership. We don't own our music. We don't own our movies. We barely own our cars. But the butcher owned his life. This is the statistic that hurts the most for young people listening today. It's the statistic that sounds like a lie, but I promise you, it is historical fact. That butcher on his single income supported an entire family. His wife often didn't need to work. If she did, it was usually part-time, for pin money, extra cash for Christmas presents or a new coat. It wasn't for survival. That one wage paid for the food for a family of 5. It paid for the clothes on their backs. It paid for a car in the driveway, usually a British-made car like a Ford, a Morris, or an Austin. And it paid for 2 weeks in a caravan at the seaside every August. In 1965, the average house price was roughly £3,500. The average yearly wage was around £1,000. That means a house cost 3.5 times your salary. Today, in many parts of Britain, a home costs 10 to 15 times the average salary. Think about that. A man cutting meat in 1965 was financially closer to buying a house than a junior doctor is in 2024. The butcher didn't need a wealthy father or a guarantor. He just needed a record of honest work. He walked into the bank, sat down with the manager who he probably knew from the pub and shook hands on a deal. That trust was the currency of the time. I want to pause here for a second because this numbers game is shocking. If you are watching this and you bought a house in the 60s or 70s, please go to the comments right now and tell us what you paid for it. And if you are a young person renting today, tell us what you're paying. Let's get a real comparison down there in the comments section so people can see the truth of what has been taken from us. But the butcher's wealth wasn't just about what he kept, it was about what he shared. This is the secret economic concept called the local multiplier effect. When you bought a steak from the butcher in 1965, the money went on a journey, but it never left the town. The butcher took a cut. He paid the local farmer who raised the cow. He paid the local accountant who did his books. He hired the local teenager to ride the delivery bike. He took his profit and spent it at the local pub. He bought his shoes from the local cobbler. Every single pound stayed in the town. It circulated, making everyone in the community slightly richer. Now look at today. You spend £50 at a massive supermarket. Where does that money go? Does it go to the local farmer? No, they are squeezed for every penny, forced to sell milk for less than it costs to produce. Does it go to a local accountant? No, it goes to a corporate headquarters in London or a tax haven in Luxembourg. Does it pay a delivery boy? No, it pays for an automated checkout machine that doesn't pay taxes and doesn't buy shoes. The money leaves your town instantly. We stripped the wealth out of our own communities in exchange for cheap convenience. We thought we were getting a bargain, but we were actually bankrupting our neighbors. We hollowed out our own towns from the inside. Then came the change. It started slowly in the late 60s, but by the 80s it was unstoppable. The supermarket. They arrived like spaceships landing on the edge of town. Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda. They promised a futuristic dream. Everything under one roof. Bright lights, wide aisles, parking for 500 cars. It was dazzling. It was modern. It felt like progress, but the butcher couldn't fight them. Why? Because the supermarkets played dirty. They used a weapon called the loss leader. They sold essentials like milk and meat below cost, losing money on purpose. They could afford to bleed cash on chicken for a year if it meant destroying the local competition. The local butcher couldn't compete. He paid farmers a fair price to keep the supply chain alive. He couldn't sell a chicken for 50 pence if it cost him 60. He refused to compromise on quality, while supermarkets were happy to sell water-injected meat wrapped in plastic. Slowly, the customers stopped coming. First, it was just for the big shop tins and toilet roll. But then it rained one Tuesday. It was easier to get the meat at the supermarket too. Convenience became a habit. The shutters came down. Generational names, Smith & Sons, Higgins family butchers were painted over. The butcher didn't just lose a job, he lost his legacy. The building that was once a hub of noise and life became a betting shop, then a charity shop. Now it likely stands empty with boarded-up windows. The heartbeat of the high street had stopped. So when we look back at the butcher of 1965, we shouldn't just feel nostalgia. We should see him as a symbol of a lost economy. An economy where hard work paid for a dignified life. An economy where money stayed local, building schools instead of offshore bank accounts. An economy where a worker, any worker, could afford a home without a lifetime of crippling debt. We traded our security for cheap prices. We traded our community for convenience. We traded the smell of fresh bread for the beep of a scanner and the silence of a delivery app. Looking at the struggle of our young people and the loneliness of our elderly, I have to ask you one final question. Was it really worth the price? If this video brought back memories of your local butcher or baker, please write their names in the comments below. Let's keep their memory alive. And if you want to understand more about where our wealth really went, make sure you are subscribed. I'll see you in the next one.